don't know exactly when it was that we got home, but the Christmas decorations were already up and the preparations were in full swing. And Christmas had a smell at my grandma's house. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Was there a smell at certain people's houses at Christmas time? And at my grandma's house, the most distinctive smell was anise candy. She made it, and it was just this really unusual thing. And she must have made it right before we got home, because to this day, when I smell anise candy, I'm taken right back to 1985 and that feeling of being safely home. Now this Advent, we are talking about coming home for Christmas. It's an experience that most of us can relate to on some level. Whether it's heading out to our grandparents' homestead as children, or coming home from college for the holidays, or bundling the kids up and driving halfway across the country to spend Christmas with our own parents. It's actually ironic how often home, in this mindset, isn't the place where we actually live now. Home, when it gets down to the core, is kind of an idea, right? It's a feeling, a place where we know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we are known and loved and cared for. It's a place where we know we belong. Is anyone here hungry for that this Advent? I know I am. I think most of us are. It's like there's a wistfulness and a homesickness built into Christmas that none of the commercialism and, happy choruses and flashing lights can quite obliterate. It's been baked into Christmas from the very beginning. So in Luke 2, verses 1 through 7, the gospel writer tells us that in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available to them. Now, this story strikes me on so many levels. Here Joseph is, returning to a home that isn't really his home anymore. Now, I think most of us tend to assume that Joseph, like Mary, was a native of Nazareth. Luke makes a big deal about Joseph being of the house and the line of David, so we kind of just assume that everyone was supposed to report to their ancestral home, as if the Romans actually cared about that, or that made any sense at all. Because, think about this for a minute. How would every man in the Roman Empire know which ancestral home to report to? Could you imagine the chaos? And Romans were not big on chaos. Romans did not like chaos. In reality, Augustus decreed that everyone should go to their own town to register. So while Joseph seems to have been living and working in Nazareth, which was near the booming city of Sepphoris, and lots of building projects going on, and it was a great place for a carpenter to work, it's almost certain that he was from Bethlehem originally, even if it was just when he was really, really young. Joseph was doing exactly what so many of us do at Christmas. Only this time, he was bringing his pregnant fiancée along for the journey, and the accommodations were a little tight. Now, contrary to popular belief, there weren't any Motel 6s or La Quintas in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. And since we've just been through a series on hospitality, we should know that no self-respecting Middle Easterner would have turned a family with a pregnant woman away in the middle of the night, especially if they were relatives. That just wasn't something that happened. That's just kind of a laughable idea, actually, in that culture. The word that the King James translates as inn is better translated as guest room. It's the same room that they used to describe the upper room where Jesus and the disciples had the final dinner. So here's what was going on. A typical first century home in Israel would have had one main room with a space dug out to the side to bring in the cows or the donkeys or the really valuable livestock at night. And there were feeding troughs that actually dug into the floor near the dugout so the cows and donkeys could just reach over and get their food out of there. It was a really nifty system, actually, that kept everyone safe and warm inside the house. Now, if there was a second room behind the main one, or a second story, like the family room, that's where the family and the guests usually slept. So that's what they're talking about when they talk about a guest room. So what Luke is telling us is that since those rooms were already full, they already had family coming in from out of town, and you relate to that, the rooms get a little full. Mary and Joseph were relegated to the pull-out couch in the living room, and the baby was sleeping on a blanket folded up in a laundry basket. Right? That would be our modern day equivalent of what was going on. So it wasn't as dire as the traditional telling that has Mary giving birth in a dark, cold stable with no one but Joseph to help her, which is also kind of a laughable idea for 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. But it probably wasn't all that they hoped for either. I bet Mary wished that her mother was there. I bet Joseph wished he could provide some more security for his fledgling family. It is hard to feel uprooted and adrift, especially during the holidays. You know, and sometimes we feel uprooted and adrift even when we have everything our culture tells us should make us happy. A comfortable place to live, a loving family, some basic level of economic security, being able to fulfill our needs. But there is still something inside of us that longs for more. There's this deep